I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, come on Ben, that's a clickbait title, right? It's not possible to improve your fluency immediately. Well, I believe it is, just by making a few relatively simple changes. And if you give me just a few minutes of your time, I'll explain how. Thank you for joining me again, and welcome to any new viewers. Now, in these videos, I try to help English learners with the learning process. And learning a second language is a long process. It's really a lifelong process. It never really ends. So in this video, I'm not trying to give you any kind of magical shortcut to learning English. No, I'm specifically looking at speaking fluency, and I'm going to give you some tips on how to improve your speaking fluency immediately. And the first tip I'm going to give is slow down. Now, many people are under the misconception that fluency is the same as speaking quickly or velocity, but that's not the case at all. In fact, if you think of some of the greatest speakers in history or in current times, they probably speak quite slowly. And there are a couple of important advantages to slowing down when you're speaking a second language. The first one is quite obvious, but people don't always think about it. It gives you more time to think. Often when we're speaking in a second language, we get nervous and we naturally speak more quickly. And that has the result that we don't have time to think about what we're going to say and formulate the grammar and the vocabulary of what we want to express. So if you just slow down, then it gives your brain more time to formulate the sentence you're going to say. Another advantage of slowing down is that it makes you sound more confident.
People who speak quickly tend to sound very nervous. You may notice that when you speak to people in your own language.
As I said, great speakers throughout history or in current times tend to speak slowly. If you think of presidents, prime ministers, politicians in general, they have a lot of experience of speaking in public. So that will really help with your English speaking if you can just consciously remind yourself to slow down. And tip number 2 is kiss. Now, I don't mean really kiss, especially not during the current climate. You don't want to be going around kissing strangers, although I would never recommend that. But KISS is an acronym, K-I-S-S, and it stands for Keep It Simple, Stupid. The stupid is extra, you don't need that. But really it's keep it simple is the important part of this acronym. And this is really important, I think, when you're speaking a second language. The more we learn a language, the more grammar we know, the more advanced vocabulary we know, and we tend to want to use that subconsciously. We want to use that in our speech, but it's not always appropriate, because sometimes it can hinder or make it more difficult to express what you want to say, because maybe you want to use the mixed conditional or reported speech or inversion, or you want to use this new vocabulary you've learned. When sometimes it's just better in real world situations to keep it simple. It's good in the class or when you're studying or learning yourself to practice these grammar concepts and advanced vocabulary. But in real world situations, try to keep it simple. Your level will improve through study and through surrounding yourself by English and by practicing. And then what was complicated 1 year ago will be simple next year. So let it happen naturally. Don't try to force it into conversation. Do that in class or if you're practicing, but not in a real world situation, because it will make the communication more complicated. Okay? And now let's look at the third and probably the most important tip. Now, before I give you this tip, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my personal experience learning a second language, Spanish. I live in Spain, but I started learning Spanish a few months before I came to live in Spain, but just self-study. And at that time it was really good fun. I just learned a few words or very basic sentences, and everyone was impressed. I had some Spanish speaking friends, and if I could say, "Hola, ¿cómo estás?" everyone was like, "Oh, that's fantastic. Ben can say, hello, how are you?" in Spanish. All good, everything was positive. And then when I came to live in Spain, that continued for a few months. I started saying slightly more complicated sentences. I was expanding my vocabulary. But little by little, over time, that fun disappeared from the process, from the experience. The more I learned, the less fun it became, because suddenly it wasn't okay if I made mistakes. You know, after 2 years living in Spain and I made a mistake, it was quite embarrassing. Oh no, come on, Ben, you've been living in Spain for 2 years. You shouldn't make these mistakes. So then I started to get more nervous speaking in Spanish, which is, you know, quite strange. The more time I spent in Spain, the more nervous I got speaking the language, because I knew more. The more I knew, the more I realized the mistakes I was making, and that I wasn't good enough in my own mind. And this is all about, you know, perception of what other people think of you, worrying about what other people think about your level, about the mistakes you make. And this brings me on to tip number 3, and it's to remember the objective. The objective of learning a language. It's communication. That's the reason you're learning English. That's the reason we all learn a second language. It's to be able to communicate. So if you have this obsession with what people are thinking, or worry so much about the mistakes you're making, it will stop you speaking fluently, because you'll be worrying, you'll be asking questions in your head about, did I say that right? Oh no, I used the wrong verb tense. My pronunciation was terrible there, or that word isn't the right word, it's not what I wanted to use. But as I said, when I started learning Spanish, people understood me. I made lots more mistakes, but it was more fun, I was more relaxed, and I was communicating. So that's a little bit more difficult to change, but it is possible to change it now if you just change your mindset, change the way you think when you're communicating. Because communication is the key. It's the only objective to learning a language. Okay, thank you for joining me again, and I hope you found this video useful. Let me know in the comments if you have any other tips, and if maybe you disagree with me, that's fine. I'm okay with that. Okay, hope to see you again very soon for another video. Bye.